Okay, I think we are ready to go. It is noon. Welcome to our first ever Leaders Learning Live. I am Marissa McCasty, and I am the Leadership Development Manager for SUNY SAIL Institute. The SUNY SAIL Institute provides leadership development training to faculty, staff, and students across the SUNY system and beyond. Leaders Learning Live will occur every Thursday of the month from 12 to 1. This interview-style webinar series provides insights into a wide variety of higher education leadership topics and best practices at no cost to you. You can also visit our website and register for any and all that are of interest to you and your colleagues. Prior to my role at SAIL, I served on the Applied Learning team at SUNY System Administration. Strengthening and providing opportunities for professional development for my colleagues and folks in the higher ed space has always been one of my interests and passions, and I'm fortunate to be able to do that with you all here today. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items for everyone. If you can make sure that you are muted and that your lines are all muted. We will be talking to Dr. Jill Lansing, and so if there are any sort of questions or comments that you have, please put them in the chat and I will be happy to address them as they come in. And just so you know, this webinar will be recorded so that you can look back and view it at a later date. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Jill Lansing. She serves as the Assistant Vice Chancellor for the Education Pipeline, Community Colleges and Education Pipeline at SUNY System Administration. Dr. Lansing will be discussing PIAAC data to explore how US adults use technology and problem-solving skills in the workplace to strengthen student success. The Program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies, PIAAC, is a large international data set to assess the skills adults need to participate in the 21st century economy. We will be learning what the data reveals and its implications for higher education leaders. Jill, welcome.
Thank you so much. Marissa, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Good. Thank you.
Thank you. So Jill, if you could talk a little bit about yourself and your role at SUNY System Administration.
Sure, and I'm also going to share my screen so that we can all follow along with using the same PowerPoint presentation. I just want to first thank you so much. Thank you to all of you for joining us during this lunch hour, and I really appreciate it. I was looking at the participants list, and I see some very familiar faces, including some colleagues who study with me, as well as some colleagues who I've worked with. And I'm just looking forward to discussing PIAAC with you today, and also our goals for the workforce of the future, and to learning more from you too about your ideas and your best practices that you're using now in the field. So it's really an honor to be here today. I also wanted to thank SUNY SAIL because this is just an amazing opportunity to really learn from one another and talk to other colleagues in the field about really promising practices and what is going on. So congratulations on starting this webinar series, and I look forward to learning from colleagues down the road. I also want to thank Director Lane for his leadership, and Carolyn Matisky. I actually presented this the first time at the Conference for Instructional Technology in the spring, and got some great feedback from Carolyn and from other colleagues, and we thought it would be useful to do this webinar today. And also to Marissa, who's been phenomenal with helping to organize today's webinar and also keep me on track and to goals. So with that, I'd like to get started. Yes, my name is Jill Lansing, and I am the Assistant Vice Chancellor for the Education Pipeline at the State University of New York. And our goal really is to help students move through the educational pipeline, beginning in K-12, progressing through college, and then into the workforce. And so we've been working in many venues on those areas of really trying to create a seamless education pipeline so that students are able to progress from beginning to end, recognizing there are many points at which people stop out of their educational pathway and then also come back on. So how do we make that easiest for students, whether they be traditional age students or adults? And we'll talk a lot about that today in terms of what the picture tells us about the pathways to success and where we need to really meet students where they are. And that's really a theme that you'll hear again and again this afternoon. And I just wanted to say that one of the things that we really want to get to you from this office, at the system office, and what kind of services can we provide, is really to bring you things that you need to support your work. So one of those things is data, and I know everybody on this call is very data driven, and data is a constant priority. We can't really do anything effectively unless it's driven by good data. So we recognize that importance. So to the extent that we can be helpful with bringing you data resources, we're really happy to do that. So that's part of today's mission. The other thing is resources. I work for Johanna Duncan-Poitier, the Senior Vice Chancellor for community colleges in the education pipeline, and she's been really, really helpful with bringing and providing leadership with bringing resources to our campuses so you can do some really innovative and creative things, and also things that are evidence-based and data-driven. So to the extent that this can support those goals as well. And then also the scale-up capacity. At SUNY, with our 64 campuses, of which all of you are really super innovative leaders, we really have the capacity to bring great things to scale. So as I talk to you about the data today, I also, like I said, look forward to learning about what you're doing and then learning about what we can actually bring to scale in a big way in New York and in the nation. And I'm going to start with the PIAAC presentation, and then I was going to talk a little bit about sort of a case study about how we've been able to use the data to set ourselves up for action and then for future resources and scale up opportunities to solve complex problems. So with that, I think I'll get started. Marissa, do you want to start with a question, or should I just move through the slide presentation?
Sure, yes, I would love to ask a question. So what skills would you say are in demand for adults in the 21st century economy?
Sure, that's a really great question. I think a lot of people that are on the call certainly have heard what skills are so important. And really the genesis for my interest in PIAAC, which is really a tremendous data set that I'll talk to you about as the conversation progresses, was because in New York, we have, as educators, so many partners in business and industry that are truly global partners that are competing for a global workforce. So the competition is tremendous, and these global leaders are looking for a workforce everywhere they can find it, at all levels, looking for students at all levels in the educational spectrum. So, students that have finished high school and are seeking an associate's or a certificate program, all the way to our advanced graduate degrees to train the highest level engineers and scientists, mathematicians of the future. So I put a few of the examples that I was talking about here on the screen. And we've been working with them closely to try to say, how can we prepare the workforce for the future, but also how can we prepare future global citizens? That's so important. And we'll see together as we progress through the presentation about how the humanities really impact the workforce impact the humanities, and how both are so critical to preparing the students of the future. So you'll see that as well. I'd like to bring up an example because we work closely with Corning Incorporated in Corning, New York, the Greater Southern Tier, and they often talk about how they have really a global reach when they talk about workforce development and recruitment for the future for their work. And they're right now probably very famous for making Gorilla Glass on cell phones, so it's a real concept that we can all relate to, but they're constantly in the mode of innovation. So they're trying to constantly recruit and prepare the future innovators so that they can continue as a company, but also that they can, bring quality of life to our world. But their primary objective is to really recruit within the Greater Southern Tier and within New York State. So they've really thought about that and have made many partnerships with our regional colleges and universities, and that's true for everyone here on this list. So it kind of just gets you thinking about really what a global world we live in, and how whether it be healthcare or IT or aerospace, and I'm going to move to the next slide, the skills that we're hearing are very, very similar. So we're looking for students with communication skills, ability to collaborate with colleagues, critical thinking skills, analysis, the things that we're seeing across the industries, whether it be pharmaceuticals, communication, aerospace, service, healthcare, manufacturing, is really need for innovation, for greater advancements in technology. We're seeing a lot of digital platforms, automation, artificial intelligence, customization, but really at the heart of all this are people. So what kind of people skills, what kind of 21st century learning skills do we need our students to have in order to be really effective in the new economy? So that's kind of the premise for this discussion today and other discussions we've been having around the issue of the workforce of the future and how colleges and universities are so instrumental to that work and preparing students with the skills they're going to need to be successful in life. So those are kind of gives you an idea of the skill sets that we're talking about. And moving along, so I was working a little bit with Marissa on the question, so I can kind of guess what's coming. But one of the things that I've had the real tremendous opportunity to do is to work with the PIAAC data system. And as I said, much of our work is always data-driven and evidence-based, and it's what the grantors want to see, it's what our policymakers want to see, it's what our education leaders want to see when we talk about what is going to be our approach to next steps for educational advancements and also the workforce advancements. So PIAAC has been really, really an awesome data set to use to really kind of look at the workforce skills of students today, and particularly adult students. Many of you may know about the PISA data set because that's normally in the paper and we're being compared with other countries about how well our students are doing in reading and math and science through the PISA scores. So PIAAC is kind of the equivalent of PISA for adult students, and it is organized by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. And I put the link there so you could actually get to the PIAAC summary. There's also another link that would be helpful to you, and it's just called PIAACgateway.com. And the resources that are provided by the OECD and also ETS are just amazing and really phenomenal. And at the end of the presentation, I'll just talk to you about some next steps that they're working on, as well as some free training opportunities. And that's how I really got engaged in PIAAC, because it really does allow you to look at skill building from a global perspective, and then also really to dig in to what's happening in the United States. And then I'll also share with you a preview of what's coming up after the United States breakdown. They're really innovators in terms of how they look at data and how they're able to reach out across the world, really, to find out where individual skill sets are among adults across the world. So just a great resource, and we'll start digging in. So the PIAAC, as I said, is a survey of adult skills. It's a large-scale international survey of adults. They have approximately 250,000 adults aged 16 to 65 surveyed across 33 countries. So it's very informative data if we're looking at this from an international perspective. In the US, the sample also goes to age 70, so we can really break down the data by age bands. And the way the analysis is set up too, there's a lot of flexibility in your ability to analyze by age and by other indicators that I'll go through. Probably the main outcome of PIAAC is that it assesses the key cognitive and workplace skills for society and the global economy in 3 major areas. And those areas are literacy, numeracy, and problem solving in technology-rich environments. And I'm going to go through those a little bit, but essentially what happens is at the end of the PIAAC data, every individual has a literacy composite score, a numeracy composite score, and then also a problem-solving in technology-rich environments composite score that allows us to sort of assess where individuals are compared to other individuals in the United States and then across other nations internationally. And you can compare very easily 2 countries, so across 2 countries if you're very interested in that, or just the United States, or across the whole international data set. So all of that data is readily available. And there's 2 ways to really analyze the data. One of it is through a publicly available tool that's available on PIAACgateway.com. And you don't need any additional software to do that. So it's totally web-based, and you can analyze the data set internationally on that tool. But if you want to dig a little deeper, and some of the data that I'm sharing today actually is analyzed using SPSS or SAS, with another tool called the IDB Analyzer that the OECD provides on their website. So it's easy to connect with them and to actually download the tools that you need to do this if you want to do a real extensive analysis. But just to get started on the data set, if you just go to PIAACgateway.com, you'll be able to find the tools that you can just get kind of friendly with the data with. And then also the other piece of PIAAC is there's a prison population study. So if anyone is interested in the U.S. prison population and the skill development in that population of people, there's also a separate lens to look at that data. And so I think there were some preconditions or competencies that OECD was looking for when they were talking about PIAAC, and the preconditions for successful integration and partnership in a labor market, education and training, and social and civic life. So you'll see the questions as we go through some of these samples. Really try to get to, what does the labor market look like? What's the education and training? And what's the social and civic life across the countries? They made sure that the questions that they were asking were relevant to all adults, and that they were also highly transferable to relevant social fields and work situations. And therefore, the data is learnable and can help to influence policy. And that's where, for us, it was so helpful, because it really does kind of give us a real preview of what the adult population looks like in the U.S., and then sort of where we need to meet students and what gaps we need to fill in terms of meeting the needs of individual students to continue on the educational pathway to success. The literacy score, I'll start with that because it kind of gives us a sense of where our adults are in terms of reading, writing, prose. A lot of the things that I know many of you teach in our colleges, from our community colleges, through our baccalaureate degree programs to our graduate programs, to helping students to develop literacy skills and why that's important. And the link here is about what the literacy composite score is of American adults, but also what kinds of literacy skills are adults using at home and also at the workplace. And so you're able to actually correlate the scores they have, or what kinds of skills they've been taking in terms of education and training, and then also correlate that to what they're doing at work by occupation. And so I took a little bit of data to try to give you a glimpse of that. But essentially the literacy domain is the student's ability to understand, evaluate, use, and engage with written text, to participate in society, to achieve one's goals, and develops one's knowledge and potential. And it encompasses a range of skills. The PIAAC assessment is actually given via computer. And then if you are unable to take the computer version, there's also a written version. So it really does tell you a little bit about students' aptitude in literacy through the computer and or the writing sample. And there's some differences in that, and we can get into detail later or after this webinar. But it encompasses a wide range of skills, from decoding of written words and sentences to the comprehension, interpretation, and evaluation of complex text. So that's kind of what they were trying to do in literacy. In terms of numeracy, it's measuring adult ability to access, use, interpret, and communicate mathematical information and ideas in order to engage in and manage the mathematical demands of a wide range of situations in adult life. So it involves managing a situation or solving a problem in a real context by responding to mathematical content, information, ideas represented to the student in multiple ways. So the survey instrument is quite extensive, and that's how they originally start, and then ultimately get to the numeracy composite score that will look like in a minute. And then problem solving in technology-rich environments is really kind of an interesting thing. And I know many of you are interested in, how do we improve students' problem-solving skills? And as we'll see, it's really an important skill in the workplace. And when Marissa, you had asked me earlier about what kinds of skills students need and adults need to be effective in the 21st century economy, problem solving is a big one. How do you break down a problem, analyze its complexities, discuss the problem with other colleagues, come back, generate ideas around innovation, and then analyze the ideas and kind of build on ideas, cut out ideas, and really, try to get to a place where you're actually solving a complex problem. So this is particularly important, I think, to our business and industry leaders, and also to those of you who are leaders in your colleges and universities. It's defined by PIAAC as the ability to use digital technology, communication tools, and networks to acquire and evaluate information, communicate with others, and perform practical tasks. So again, many factors go into the development of the score, and you know, I can talk about them to you about them later. But in the meantime, it's a really helpful composite score when we're talking about international comparisons. And then also the background questionnaire, I'll get into that a little bit in a minute, but that's probably honestly the most helpful part of the PIAAC data set, because there's so many rich components related to education and training, workforce, really very particular components, you know, in terms of workforce. Where are you working now? What is your work like? Have you been looking for work in the last 12 months? If you haven't and been unsuccessful, why? And so I picked out a couple of those data points, but really, really helpful data also around health patterns of adults internationally. So if you're interested in getting at, you know, dental health or medical health or routine doctor's visits, all of that is there, and also can be coordinated and analyzed in terms of the literacy, numeracy, and problem-solving scores of individuals. So very interesting tie between education and healthcare as well. And moving on, the next slide, I'll probably have to get this to you in a PDF so you can see it better, but it really speaks to the formal education of adults aged 16 to 65. And I have several pie charts that really just try to show where we are formally, as you know, internationally, but also in the U.S. about formal education levels. And essentially, about 36% of our adults, age 16 to 65, have a bachelor's degree or higher, which means that just less than 2/3 have somewhere below a bachelor's degree, so an associate's degree or upper secondary. 44% of adults 16 to 65 reported having completed upper secondary education. An additional 11% completed associate's degree. But we have a large population of adults in the U.S. That really have an opportunity for upskilling and new training. And we in the U.S. really value lifelong learning. And so it kind of really sort of emphasizes the importance of our work in terms of helping adults to continue on the pathway to lifelong learning, to degrees or to training and education that they might need to be successful in their careers. And the data is consistent across many of the nations. Other nations are also dealing with the same breakdown, a similar breakdown. I mean, it goes as low as 19% of adults in Italy, for example, have reached the degree status of the bachelor's or higher. But you know, we're kind of all in the same boat in terms of needing more formal and also informal training and activities in order to be successful in the future. And the case study that I'm going to discuss a little bit at the end of the presentation has to do with our employers here in New York, who have told us many times that one of the biggest populations that they're trying to reach now are the adults and students who have completed high school, but may need to complete an associate's degree or some kind of post-secondary training in the way of a certificate or other mechanism to get into the workforce. And then many of our providers, our workforce providers, are saying we can help to train them at that point. It's just really getting them that next level. So that's sort of what we call the middle level skills gap. But we'll see that there's opportunities for training and retraining and upskilling throughout the adult life. So just to give you a sense of what the formal education pattern looks like, I think for us, you know, we are a little bit ahead of other nations in terms of formal education achievement, but it also shows us that we have a lot more that we could do. And to think that almost 2/3 of our population could really, you know, benefit significantly from upskilling in order to, you know, really be competitive in the changing economy is really a word of good news for us, because I think we have a lot of potential. So that's sort of just a picture of the formal education of adults. And from there, I was talking a lot about sort of the headline of the PIAAC data. But the PIAAC data, as I mentioned, is really about doing proficiency scores in literacy, numeracy, and problem solving in technology-rich environments. So I wanted to give you a glimpse of where the U.S. stood in terms of those three categories. The highest scale score is a 500. And you'll notice that the United States is pretty much in the middle of the pack, pretty much average performance, with the average score being 272 in the way of literacy scale score for the composite scoring PIAAC. So again, we have nations that are outperforming us at the top, no surprise to many of you, Japan, Finland, Netherlands. And then, we're more sort of essentially around the average of the international average for PIAAC. Kind of almost similar to what we see in PISA. For those of you who've been following the PISA scores for young students, you'll see some similarities. Also, just wanted to highlight numeracy. Now, numeracy, maybe some bad news here, because we actually, as a country, are below the national average in the U.S. for numeracy scores. And, one of the things PIAAC has done is they provided us with a lot of infographics around, what these data really translate to real life. And so one of the things they've shared with us is that in the category of working with numbers, only 3 out of 10% of adults in the U.S. are unlikely to be able to calculate some really basic calculations, like the cost of a daily car rental, other kinds of competencies, but just really basic calculations. 3 out of 10 are unlikely to be able to do that. And it's kind of important to remember, because as you're talking to students, and again, the theme of meet students where they are, the numeracy skills of adults in the U.S. are below the international average. So a little bit more that we need to do to think about how we can help to provide on-ramps and upskilling in numeracy. And then also, unfortunately, similarly, with the problem-solving and technology rich environment scale score, again, highest being a 500, the United States as an average scored 274 and was actually the worst performing country in the world in terms of using digital technology, communications tools, and networks to acquire and evaluate information. And anecdotally, I've been hearing a lot of this, that it's ironic to me how, we're relying increasingly on technology, yet our students and our, returning adults seem not to have the problem-solving skills that we, are hoping for. So how can we work on that more strategically? And I would love your ideas. I'm going to stop for a minute because Marissa has been managing the chat box, and I don't know if anybody has any practical strategies to share or thoughts about the idea how we're really losing ground in places like problem-solving, even though technology is advancing at such a fast speed.
Thank you. Yes. If any of you have any sort of comments or responses to that, please put them in the chat box.
And just think about it. And I also wondered, I was going to talk a little bit about what we're doing here at SUNY system with in collaboration with our campuses and our leaders in K-12 and industry to really try to help to improve problem-solving skills in students and numeracy skills. And I'd love to hear your ideas and best practices too, because we can definitely learn from one another, and then also learn what works, so we can really truly bring it to scale in an effective way. So Marissa, if you can just interrupt. I can't see the chat, so you might just have to literally interrupt, but that would be fine. Thanks.
Sure. Yes, we do have a question, or a question. John is asking, how big of a difference is 20 points on the scale?
So it's a significant difference in this case, but I can get you the actual the data analysis so we can break it down and determine the level of significance. But the 20 points is significant here. So we're significantly different from the PIAAC national average. So again, I can break that down for you a little more offline, but it is a significant difference in terms of scale score.
Great. Thank
you. Just moving on to the next slide, which is just sort of an overview. And the PIAAC data has been used by many, many policy leaders. So we'll be able to find a lot of analysis that's been done using the PIAAC data. But as I mentioned, the challenge we have is really kind of looming in the U.S. around education and workforce. 18% of our adults have low literacy scores in the U.S. And 30% have low math skills. And I know that many of you have encountered this, because we at System are really working with our campuses to figure out what's working in the way of remediation. And we have students coming to our campuses in community colleges, for example, who really need math skills that they're coming in with a big deficit in. So how do we, work with them to really kind of improve their skills in a quick way so we can get them on track to credit-bearing courses? We've been using math pathways, and there's many other models that have been effective at doing that. But, when we think about math and literacy scores, the problem really begins as early as grades 3 through 8. Here in New York, in particular, the Board of Regents just released the ELA and math proficiency scores on the grades 3 through 8 indicators. And it's about a 48% average, but mostly below 50% of students that really can be labeled as proficient in those basic skills. So I think we have to look at this as really a state and a nation about how we can do a much better job at trying to build pathways to literacy and math skills beginning at the earliest level, so that when students get to college and they're getting to the workforce, we're not faced with these scores that are really, not most positive to us, and it means that we have to do more work. But we have to think about it more as a pathway and trying to have some strategic direction in this area. So it's always helpful to see where we do compare in terms of the rest of the world. And then it's not, when I was talking about grades 3 through 8, it is true that our young people are coming to us without the skills to begin with, but also even after some training, 63% of adults with low literacy have a high school education or higher. So 63% of those adults that have low literacy have graduated from high school. And then they're coming to us at college, and we're trying to figure out, how to meet their needs, again, meet the student where they are. So it's a challenge for us, and I really do look forward to learning from you what's working on your campuses to make that happen. And I think the challenge is great even at the community college level, but even at the baccalaureate degree level, and I'm sure for the, even at times the advanced STEM fields, that how do we really engage all students, including these 63% who have low literacy skills and a high school diploma, into our work. And then similarly, 69% of adults with low math skills also have a high school education or higher. So it's almost 70% of those with high school degrees in the U.S. are those that really need greater skill development. So we were constantly talking about upskilling and reskilling with this data. And at CIT, I just presented a spotlight on millennials, just to give you a sense of the individual populations, and also when we look at data development, how you're able to analyze the different age bands, as I mentioned before. You can definitely break it out by the ages that you're interested in looking at. If you're looking at younger students or even older adults, and to talk about like where their skills are and to what extent they use different skills in the workforce and at home. And I'll get on that a little bit more. But just a spotlight of millennials, because I think they're a really interesting population. We're hearing about how millennials are so much different than the traditional workforce in terms of their dependence on technology, and their being very project-based oriented, and interest in expanding the horizons frequently. And so we've heard a lot about millennials and the differences they have. But it was just really interesting to me that this was a policy document that was released by a group called Changing the Equation. And they were just saying the digital nativeness of the millennial does not mean that they're necessarily tech savvy. And when I shared this with our colleagues at CIT, it was no surprise to them. They were, we were talking to library specialists and media specialists and others who said even though they have the technology, really being able to analyze the information, sort through it, and use the information to solve problems is sometimes a struggle to some of these students. So I was fascinated with the fact that 83% of millennials say they sleep with their cell phones, but only 58% of millennials actually have poor skills. So 58% of millennials have poor skills with the problem solving in technology-rich environments. And the US millennials, unfortunately, were ranked dead last out of 19 countries tested in these skills in PIAAC. So just lots more to think about with millennial students, but I think even though we have access to technology, and this goes for all adults, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're good with solving problems and have those skills that we need to really analyze complex situations and produce some outcomes that we can share with other colleagues and hopefully get to one that is effective. So just to think about the needs of individual students, and that technology isn't always a magic bullet in terms of helping us to gain headway on complex problems. So millennials is just an interesting example. So I wanted to move back a lot to getting into the PIAAC data, and I talked to you earlier about the background questionnaire, and the reason I bring it up is because it is just so rich in information. And so I thought it might really be helpful just to kind of walk through some of the things that are at play here, but it really does get into discrete data like use of influencing skills at work, use of planning skills at work. I put a few here, and I'll read through a couple that might be helpful, but in terms of if you're looking to break down the literacy scores or even look at different indexes of, indices of using all of these different job skills, either on the job or at home, or also how to develop those skills, the background questionnaire is the place to go, and provides characteristics and background on demographics like age, sex, country of birth, household and family structure, number of persons in the household, activity of a spouse or partner, number of children and their ages, languages spoken, immigration status, social backgrounds, including, highest level of education of parents, number of books in the home at age 16, formal studies in previous years, educational experience, current study, if a student has left formal education at some point, why and when, and what was the level of course they left at. But, to the extent that students have taken, courses while they've been employed while studying, did studies take place inside or outside working hours? So those of you who are looking forward to, or who are working with employers and really trying to get at, when do we find students studying the most, or what are the biggest barriers to study or to pursuing formal or informal education, this is really the place to go, because you can really find out a lot about the adult students at any age or of any ethnicity, of any social background, educational background, et cetera. So like I said, formal and non-formal courses, total time in education and training, labor force statistics, as I mentioned before too, some health background, health status, self-assessed, volunteering, how much volunteering has someone done. So all those things can be found in the background questionnaire. So really, really a rich resource. And again, on PIAACgateway.com, but it's very, very easy to break down the indicators into by these various background questions. So lots of information for you to dig into. And I had mentioned this to Marissa, but one of, as I mentioned, the purposes of our office is really to try to help you, to provide you with the data and research that you need to back up a problem or a question or a research study. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to break down some of the data for you, to analyze it, by different characteristics that you're interested in, or even sort of give you like sort of a how-to on getting to the data and looking at specific indicators that you are really interested in seeing more about. So anytime that you need that, and Marissa's going to provide you with my email at the end of the presentation. So,
yes.
So, sorry, go ahead, Marissa.
Oh, I did have a question. What would you say are some innovative projects that are being created and implemented to further strengthen student success?
Oh yeah, that's terrific. Really good question. In New York, there are so many right now that I'm really, really excited about. Apprenticeships is one huge one, and it really comes to learning on the job and learning with the employer. And I'm going to go through some basic data, but you'll see why sort of like helping adults to upskill within the work environment is really very effective, because often they just can't get away from their work responsibilities. So apprenticeships, applied learning is so helpful from K through 12, and I know all of you are working on applied learning and enriching those experiences for students. They're so powerful. At the K-12 level, they're really helping students to come to school and combating chronic absenteeism. At the advanced levels, they're actually creating innovation in the workforce, breakthroughs. Regeneron was telling us the other day about how decades ago, people living with AIDS was essentially a death sentence for people, and now it's really a disease that is completely manageable and able to be addressed, and people go on to live long and very high quality lives. Because of medicine and innovation in research. So they're just showing different examples of, wow, like what is really possible when we think about applied learning and giving these students the experiences as often as possible to really get engaged and what the real problems are, that's where we have the most success. So I just did a presentation a couple of weeks ago about partnering education and industry together, and how from those things major breakthroughs come across. And that's, I guess, where we can really land, is like try to engage the students in a breakthrough experience. A couple of years ago, we had a grant to do mentoring of STEM students and after school programs through the NSF. And we actually were able to have our graduate STEM scientists, or graduate STEM students, work with our middle school students in an inquiry-based environment. And so we, really made sure that the after-school programs were set up as science experiments, and they were developing hypotheses and then carrying out experiments, and really started to see themselves as science, so that self-identity as a scientist was really powerful. So lots and lots of examples, and I look forward to learning more. And in fact, if you want to either send them in the chat box or send them to me and Marissa, I would love to put together sort of repository of best practices and really trying to help students to develop these important skills, and then we can certainly share them out and maybe talk to one another about what's working, and perhaps how to adapt it or scale it up at other campuses. So lots of great ideas.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any others, Marissa?
I think there's nothing in the chat right now. So I think we can. Okay, so I'll proceed a little bit with the data, and I wanted to give you just sort of a glimpse of the PIAAC data today. We don't have a lot of time, but also, I shared with you a lot of maybe dismal news in terms of overall composite score of U.S. adults related to the 3 content areas of PIAAC. But I wanted to share with you good news. The good news is, based on different scores or different items on the PIAAC assessment, they put together an index of readiness to learn. And the good news is that the U.S. really ranks highest in the index of readiness to learn among those adults that are actually employed. And I separated them in this whole presentation around 4 different areas, which is skilled occupations, semi-skilled white-collar occupations, semi-skilled blue-collar occupations, and elementary occupations. But in all cases, no matter where our adults were in the workforce, they really are excited to be able to read about new ideas and relate them to real-life situations, learn new things. The question was, if I learn something new, can I relate it to what I already know, get to the bottom of difficult things, figure out how to make ideas fit together? And if I don't understand something, I look for additional information. And back to the first question you asked me, Marissa, about like what are the skills that adults need in the workforce and 21st century economy, these are the kinds of things. And PIAAC really allows us to take the overarching concepts and really break it down to what does readiness to learn mean, and what does problem solving in technology-rich environments entail in terms of helping students to develop skills. So things like helping students to figure out how to relate the concepts that they're learning to concepts that they already know, or concepts with which they're already familiar, is a really effective way of upskilling adults in problem solving, in numeracy and literacy. So things like this, and again, I can give you, there's troves of examples in the data sets, and also I hope that we'll be able to learn from one another. So, a lot of this conversation is around skilling up, and I was looking at some data around opportunities for skilling up. And more good news is that adults participating in formal education or training in the last 6 months, over 2/3 of U.S. adults have been participating in training education in the last 12 months. So that's really great. And again, it correlates to the index of readiness to learn. I think our adults are eager to learn and really looking for opportunities to upskill. So that's really positive. So I think that the future is bright for us. And if I did provide any dismal news earlier, I think the future is bright for the U.S. and for our students. And I'm sure you have many examples of this in your lives that, again, please, we would look forward to hearing more. I just broke it down a little further with a question of the U.S. adults wanting to participate in education or training the last 12 months but didn't, why? And I thought that could just be a little bit informative to us in terms of, what we could do better to try to meet them where they are. And so the #1 indicator was people telling us that they're too busy at work. So we've been, again, trying to find ways to work with our employers to try to
provide some on-the-job upskilling. Again, the ability to relate what you're teaching to what is happening in the workforce, provide, real-life examples really is helpful. And I know, like I said, the rich applied learning experiences that you're providing them with is just so powerful. So also you see too expensive, which, cost is an issue and it's always an issue. But when we think about policy, from the system level and from the state level and from the national level, it's like, how do we address these issues? So money is, is a challenge. Childcare and family responsibilities, so providing more childcare, more distance-based options with the right supports can be effective. Again, inconvenient time, something else came up, a small number of people. But, one of the things that struck me was they weren't saying that the adults weren't saying they weren't participating in education and training because of lack of employer support. And that's good, because I think many of our employers are very, engaged in helping to advance skill development in our students, and not because they didn't have the prerequisites. So they feel there's a sense that they can do it, or that they've had the right training, maybe those that were, started in community college and are pursuing advanced degrees, but those things were less important to them than being too busy at work or the coursework being expensive, and also child and family responsibilities. So really important kinds of things to keep in mind, but also just sort of a preview of some of the data that is available in the data set. And I just took out a few examples as well of putting education and skills to practice in the work environment, because, like I said to you before, the background questionnaire has so many questions around, like, precisely what skills adults of all ages put in place in the home environment, what they're doing in the home. To what extent are they reading emails, for example? Are they reading the newspaper? I mean, it really varies, and that's why I said the indices are so helpful, because they really do, show like kind of a composite approach to how adults are learning. And I looked specifically in some of our examples of what skills that they report using in the workforce. So I have, for example, here, to what extent do adults report using planning skills at work? And it's pretty neat to, like, look at it. I've broken down by the 4 categories of occupations, but you can also break it down by specific occupations. If you're looking, like, for agriculture, for example, or if teaching, teachers might be an interesting thing to look at how much planning goes into their work that they report. But you'll see the elementary occupations are at the top with the purple, and elementary occupations, I would say, probably have the most reporting of their categories in all 0 response, which translates to really never using planning skills at work, to less than once a month, and then less than once a week, but at least once a month, and then at least once a week, but not every day, and then every day. So you'll see those individuals in the skilled occupations in particular report often using planning skills at work every day. And I think you'll also find, as we look at many of these scores, that we have to think about differentiation of what kind of planning skills they would need at the different occupational levels. But it's just interesting to see, to the extent of reported, that many adults are saying, yeah, we do use these skills at work. And I think that's consistent across the different skills that I'll show you, just kind of give you a glimpse at today, because it's important to know that, like the question of how will I use this? Well, the PIAAC data is showing that they're reporting using the things that you're teaching them at work every day. So it just kind of, again, comes back to meeting the students where they are, and then also this level of applied learning and how they can relate the concepts they know to the concepts that they're learning. Index of use of task discussion skills at work. And here I actually put skilled occupations. Again, the blue response here is never. So it's skilled occupations in the column all the way to the left, then semi-skilled white-collar occupations, then semi-skilled blue-collar occupations, and elementary occupations. And with the skilled occupations, you see the rise in the sort of everyday, which is the red bar at the top, use of task discussion skills at work, but still recognizing that even, those in elementary occupations are saying that, the green bar is indicating that they use it maybe less than once a month, but they're still kind of using these skills in the work. So what does it look like, and how, can we best prepare the students to have task discussion skills? that they can translate to work. Study planning, study habits, many more things that go into task discussion, prioritization, but those kinds of things that you can actually break down by looking at the PIAAC data. Influencing skills at work, we kind of see a similar pattern, but again, like looking at differentiation and what goes into influencing skills. You have to have a real good handle of the topic that you're working with, communication skills, collaboration skills, leadership skills. All of those things are, involved in influencing skills. And it'd be interesting to break it down, I think, too, by age, maybe by gender, lots of other ways to really dig in on this. And so I just providing you with just like really an overview just to kind of get your thinking and maybe inspire some new ideas. Numeracy skills at work and information communication technology skills at work. And I was, really interested in the information communication and technology skills at work, but also impressed with the numeracy skills at work, that are being used, particularly in the skilled, semi-skilled occupations, often. Once a week, maybe not every day, but certainly a lot. So, numeracy comes into the workplace, whether, you're in a very elementary occupation all the way up to the highest level of skill. So it's important. Same thing with information communication technology. And then I also looked at reading and writing. And I can send you these slides. And like I said, I would be more interested in kind of digging deeper and breaking it down further. But just wanted to give you a sense of how the work that you're doing matters, that, as you help students to, build reading skills, build information literacy skills, math literacy skills, it really does translate into higher performance and more use of those skills in the workplace. So it matters, and it matters in a real practical way. And then lastly, I was just talking to you earlier, and I'm going to really kind of cut this short, but really just discuss about how all this research really does translate into practice. And about a year ago, which is how I got involved in the PIAAC data, we were given the challenge to really look at the middle level skills gap, which is, I said, like those students that are post high school, but need some kind of a credential or associate's degree in order to become the occupations that you see some listed here, and how to really, you had asked earlier about innovative practices. What kind of innovative practices come out of this, that really would help to, help fill that gap. So based on data, we actually went across the state and met with over 500 educators, business partners, community leaders, and workforce data analysts. And some of the areas that we met with are here, but really talked to everybody using the PIAAC data as a basis for how we can really help to advance those numeracy, literacy, and problem-solving skills that we had talked about, before, that are in the PIAAC data, how we can advance those in New York. And so got lots of ideas, and just had a big convening here in Saratoga, and then just to sort of share with you some of the recommendations. Time and time again, meet learners where they are. Greater collaborations between for-profits, higher education, K-12, and industry. And the PIAAC data underlines all of this. Create more work-based experiences. We've been talking a lot about that. I've been talking a lot about that. I hope you have some ideas. Expand flexible and stackable credentialing opportunities. So we're talking about different on-roads, but how can students and adults develop a skill and then build upon that skill so that they can continue to grow in their jobs and also in life? And, looking at how we can do stackable credentialing. Strengthen the engagement of counselors and parents beginning at a younger age. Many of this might be very familiar to you because we were working really K-12 higher education and, older adults. We were talking about initiatives like Makerspace, Applied Learning Experiences, Project Lead the Way, really engaging students and family in home and at school. And the data in PIAAC really does emphasize the importance of that. Incentivize business and industry partnerships, maximize the new economy, new jobs and emerging trends, and then sharing responsibility for actively using the workforce data and metrics to guide decision making, which is why we're here today. So those are some of the things that came out of it. And since then, we've really been working on a lot of these different initiatives. We've had major state and federal investments, for example, in the apprenticeship program. So it's really, do a lot of that on-the-job learning we've been talking about. Statewide investment and scale-up of what works, like our PTech partnerships that really marry education and business partnerships. New stackable and degree programs that are under development in fields like mechatronics. Math pathways that has been used to really help to reduce the need for remediation in math and really help to create a growth mindset in students. So again, they relate the concepts they're learning in the remedial math informally remedial math in a way that they can really relate to. And then also align education and workforce data in a better way. And so we're working on that at the state and the national level. And then I'll just leave you with this slide, which is how to make the tools useful to you. And one of the great things I was telling Marissa is that one of the outcomes of PIAAC is that they're actually now working on small area estimates, will be huge for us. So to be able to break down this countrywide data into regions. So we'll be able to see what does the region look like for various areas, states, and counties in New York. And so the due date on that is February 2020, or actually the goal date on that. So we'll be looking for more about how to look at this data for smaller geographical populations, and you'll be able to see what it looks like in your area. So I think that'll be hugely helpful for us. Also, ETS gives a number of free training opportunities. There's one coming up on using the PIAAC log files. So like, for example, how long did it take someone to answer a question on a computer-aided test? Really, it can be different on with different test takers, and it can be telling about the student's ability to carry out a certain equation or task. So it's really very discreet, but there's lots and lots of opportunities that are coming up. I put some websites there. Also, the NCES has a great data lab for using data to inform policy. So there are some examples, and it's about 5 minutes, actually 4 minutes to 1. So I'm going to turn it over to Marissa. I just want to thank you so much for being part of the conversation today. I hope you learned some, and please, please reach out if there's anything we can do in the way of data analysis or ideas. And I would, more than anything, love to hear what you're doing in the field to really help to upskill adult learners and really prepare students for the future workforce and to become future citizens, which is so important. So thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been very interesting. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to put some contact information for Jill and myself, so that if you do have a question and you would like to reach out, and if you want to, like Jill had said, kind of dive a little bit deeper into the data on certain topics, you are more than welcome to reach out to her. And also, if you have any other questions, we will be sharing the PowerPoint out on our website. So that will be there as a resource for you. Just as a reminder, so because we do these every third Thursday of the month, our next one is October 17th, and it is on mindful writing. And so Dr. Ann Hawkins, she's the Assistant Provost for Graduate Education and Research in the Academic Programs and Planning Office. She will be talking to us about that. So we would love for you to join us. And Jill, thank you again. This has been fantastic. And we really enjoyed having you here with us today.
Thank you, and I look forward to learning more. And thank you to Sal. This is amazing. I think the web series is going to be really, really exciting. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So for everyone else, please join us next month and have a great day.